Khan's Dragonstorm is right around the corner, and for some reason we got Spider-Man spoilers instead this past weekend. We already got some Final Fantasy spoilers the week before, but it's almost like we don't believe that the Khan set can live up to the hype. Nostalgia marketing at its prime, it's almost like we don't believe that Siege Rhino and calling back to it will be enough to sell the set. Like, you're all forgetting the fact that we did literally get the printing of a new MOX and potentially a template for all future MOXes and the type of restrictions we could see. But no, we're all more worried about a new Dr. Octopus legendary that honestly is really trash when you break it down, but also has an increased price because we need to offset that cost to the consumers. More on that later, by the way. But in this video, not only did I want to touch on pricing, I also wanted to touch on a little bit of hype where we're going down the line in the future, and also just talk to y'all as a consumer. We really need to hold Wizards to the fire a little bit and understand that we might be going down a bad path. I don't want to be too doomer in this video. I did promise I would try and make more positive videos this year, but sometimes Wizards of the Coast does not make it too easy. This was inspired by this tweet from Pleasant Kenobi and a couple more that we're going to bring up here. I know some of you are a bit mixed on PK. I like the guy. I've had great interactions with him, but regardless, many of you think that he complains a lot. I think the key thing here is that we don't want to make videos as content creators that are always about complaining. It's important to have critiques about Wizards of the Coast, but it's also important to highlight the positives of it as well, which I'm again trying to do more of this year. But it also means that you can't just ignore the issues that exist in this game. It's important, as I mentioned, to critique. For Wizards of the Coast to try things, yes, but also for us as consumers to push back on this. So let me go over this tweet a bit. Would you rather a box of 12 boosters of a shiny Final Fantasy Magic cards, or a Nintendo Switch with every currently released Final Fantasy game with enough money left over for a Pro Controller and a box of Jaffa Cakes? Look, I'm a PC gamer. I grew up on PlayStation myself, and delved into a little bit of Xbox. Let me tell you, Xbox controller elite over any other controller design ever. But I do not like the Switch. I think like the Switch is a collection of mid games, like purely pushed by nostalgia marketing that does not innovate on anything. It's old hardware. It's kid software. I guess there's like some games on there that people like, but we can do better. Anyway, I that's my opinion on the Switch, but I see the point here. Now, notably, these are pre-order prices. You know, this set's going to come out in June. We have like 4, 5, maybe 6 cards, I think off the top of my head, that are like spoiled for this, like really. And I'm talking about like net new cards, because there are some cards that are just like older versions of other cards, but I think we don't have too many cards. We have some hype. I mean, Jumbo Cactuar is like some crazy pre-order price right now because of the hype behind it. No one buy that at pre-order price, by the way. That card, it will not be anywhere near the pre-order price that it is. So this price isn't really indicative of anything, but people will be buying it at this price because ultimately we see that licensing is limited, although this is going to be a licensing model that exists for a while, because you have to remember that this set now exists in standard, which has a larger implication because it's going to be in the zeitgeist of Magic for a longer period of time. It's not going to be forgotten like the Doctor Who set and the Fallout set is. For many Commander players, those sets may not be forgotten, and to be fair, for many Eternal Magic players, those sets may not be forgotten. Like your, oh my god, that 3-mana 3/1 that can return every time you cast a spell from your graveyard. That card, eternal playable. We have a few Doctor Who cards that are actually like insanely powerful in EDH as well. I've been putting Psychic Papers in so many of my decks. Like maybe that's the type of commander decks I like to build, but regardless, there are powerful cards in them, but now having them in standard and be front facing and for you to have to care about them is where things get difficult, because a lot of times people will just say, if this product isn't for you, move on. Unfortunately, now the product is for everyone. It's a standard, modern, Pioneer legal cards, and so it's going to be for everyone. You cannot ignore this, and speaking with your wallet is increasingly harder. You could speak with your wallet and not buy that set and still exist in the commander sphere and have alternatives and do different things. The problem is you can't do that anymore, because even if you try to, when it comes to commander, your other players in your playgroup will have to play this, because not everyone in your playgroup is going to be just commander. Playgroups are pretty diverse. Some of them are going to be playing constructed, some of them are going to be just playing standard, some of them are just going to be playing arena. There are going to be people that come across these cards and then ultimately put them into your commander games, and then you have to sit across from them. That whole idea of like every time you play a game of commander you have to sit across and read a card is like really frustrating. These days I think people care too much. I just kind of allow it. Like, I'm just like, read out the whole card, give me a TLDR, why are you using it, and that's all I need to know. I don't need to like discover it for myself. That's too much brain power. But it is an increasing problem, as I mentioned for the third time at this point, because it's now in standard. And I want to go over specifically the Spider-Man cards first, because the Final Fantasy stuff and its pricing is going to matter because of the increase in the price and the cost of these cards, especially in terms of pre-order pricing. That's going to come down the line in MSRP. So let's talk about the cards themselves first. So we got this whole spread from IGN. And so when it comes to cards like this, we got a sorcery, we got an artifact, and namely 4 legendary cards. Why are they legendary? Because that's going to be a bit of a problem in the next little bit. We're going to highlight why this doesn't really make sense from a commander perspective. Like more in a bit. Now, this is a panorama style design. We've seen a couple of these come out of the Lord of the Rings sets, so it's really cool to get this out of the Spider-Man side. This is going to be, I believe, more comic book based. I believe that's what I read. It's either more comic book based or more movie based. It's not going to be like a split, but it's nice to see kind of the old, like the classic Doc Ock design and all that stuff. It's really fun this way. So we have Venom, Deadly Devourer, Green Goblin Nemesis, Sensational Spider-Man, and Doc Ock. I think out of all of these, like Doc Ock is like honestly like super garbage tier. I do not understand this card. It's 7 mana. At the beginning of combat on your turn, target non-creature artifact you control becomes like an 8/8 robot villain artifact creature in addition to its other types. Like, I really don't understand what the point of this card was. Like, it's like I don't even know. It's on combat. You don't even get like upkeep triggers with this. You can't even abuse this with Paradox Haze. You can't put this into your Obeka deck and like use it there. Like, it doesn't really, like, you play this for 7 mana, it does nothing. Sensational Spider-Man is like you're jumping through hoops to like draw a bunch of cards, like at max draw 3 cards. You're putting a bunch of stun counters on things, and then you can remove up to 3 stun counters, and then you're drawing cards equal to the amount of stun counters removed this way. So yeah, there's some board presence, you're tapping things down. There is some value in that, and in these colors, there's like a fair amount of value to that. There's a bunch of stun cards in blue. But then I think the most powerful ones are going to be Venom, Deadly Devourer, and Green Goblin Nemesis. Goblin Nemesis is really cool. Like in Rakdos, whenever you discard a non-land card, put a 1/1 counter on target goblin you control. And then whenever you discard a land card, you create a tapped treasure token. Now, when it comes to stuff like this, notably, it is tapped for the treasure token. But if you had this out with like a Miser or like the enchantment that is the same effect as the Miser, that card will then, like, every time you cycle a land, so cycling is discarding. If you cycle like a Baronmoor, it's like almost like a Dark Ritual and it draws you a card. And then if you discard anything else, like you cycle a Street Wraith, you're putting 1/1 counters on your stuff. So I think a cycling discard deck is going to be really cool with something like Green Goblin Nemesis. As a payoff, by the way, I'm getting like so warm right now. So Venom, Deadly Devourer is going to be the other one where it's like soft kind of graveyard hay where you exile a creature card from any graveyard. The key to this is like it's a very good like infinite mana sink because it's 3 of any color and that's it. You're not tapping anything. And then you put X/1/1 counters on target symbiote, where X is the exiled card's like toughness. And now this is a symbiote, so you're going to be putting probably a bunch of counters on this. It has vigilance and menace, so we're probably going to be getting a little bit of support there. Obviously, if you had like a shapeshifter, that's going to be a great target to put like the 1/1 counters onto as well. So anything with like big butts and stuff like that, like Phyrexian Dreadnought, is it Dreadnought? The 1 mana one that like you have to sacrifice 12 power worth of creatures or you bury that card. So it's like a 1 mana 12/12. You can easily just pay 1, put it into your graveyard, then activate 3 with your commander and you put like 12 1/1 counters onto something. So there's a lot of power when it comes to cards like this. I'm not going to touch on the other ones. Grasping Tentacles, unfortunately not a good card. And this is the card that really got me to dig in because it says that like black, blue, and 1 for a sorcery, target opponent mills 8 cards. You may put an artifact from that player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So it's not among the cards that you milled. But then I looked into this. I'm like, yo, is this like kind of good in like modern mill? Because I'm like, yo, this set's going to be standard legal. This set is not standard legal. This is the panorama, and it's specifically only Eternal set legal. Like these panorama cards from the Lord of the Rings set are a good example of cards that, you know, kind of seep, like, you know, they're cool, like kind of pieces all throughout. Everyone thought like Mirkwood Bats was going to be really good, but Oliphant sees some like modern play here and there. We see a bit of commander play, like out of kind of a lot of other stuff here. Orcish Bowmasters obviously being like the difference maker when it comes to stuff like this. But this set is not going to be standard legal. This is a panorama, and it's only going to be Eternal format legal. It's going to be legal in Commander, Vintage, Legacy, and Oathbreaker. Why? Why would you release a panorama with 4 legendaries that are so mid, right? Like, I mean, Venom, again, like, I think the best one is probably Green Goblin Nemesis. I'm not going to lie. It's probably the best card of all of these. And then they're just not going to see it. Why would someone buy this? Right? And it kind of leads to an idea that we're going to talk about later. Like, people aren't really going to resell these. They're just going to buy them for the sake of like being a collector. It's almost like we're making Magic cards just for the sake of selling them and not playing them. Like, we're past the point of playability at this point. And it's with like main game set pieces, because secret layers are being sold for the sake of like selling. Like, you can get base copies of these cards most of the time. But that's fine because that's a cosmetic. But when it comes to something like this that are net new pieces, why are we making them so poorly designed and not in a set that's meant to be standard forward legal, but this is going to be just eternal format legal, and it's in a panorama? So this is just collectability. These cards are like so bad too. Again, like, I'm just going to keep pointing back to the Doc Ock, which is like so bad. I don't understand the point of this card. What are we doing with this card? What are we doing with this set? Even Saffron Olive confirms it here. Not printing Commander precons for Spider-Man is one of the weirdest decisions ever. So we're not going to get Commander product for this. It's just going to be standard product. It's going to be boosters, play boosters. We're going to get the panorama. Why is the panorama separate? Why are we making cards that are only meant to be collected because of their panorama style and the art that we get out of it and the evocation of it? From Hasbro CEO Chris Cox during last week's earnings call. And then Spider-Man, we feel that will do well. Now, I think the most important thing to know on Spider-Man is that it's a little bit of a different complexion of a set in terms of what's incorporated into it. Final Fantasy and Lord of the Rings had Commander decks, which usually constitute a fairly big hunk of a set's total volume. Spider-Man will be standard only cards. That won't be any kind of pre-con decks. So I'll make it a bit smaller. But like, it's not standard only cards. You're making a panorama that isn't going to be standard legal. What is the point of these cards? Right? So the thing I'm trying to get at is like, you have these cards that will not have any support whatsoever. Maybe in the Doc Ock set, there's going to be like some ramp, or maybe there's going to be like extra combat steps coming out of blue and black. And so that's how you can abuse that and create multiple 8/8s. You get payoffs for 8/8s. You have more ways to make 8/8s. No, there's going to be no commander product, no deck to support these cards. They're just going to be standalone legendaries that just do their own thing, which kind of means that if there's no precons in it, but you still need to sell to everybody, because let's be honest here, the money makers are the commander players. You're going to be pushing more commander focused product in the standard legal product, right? Like, we had a great change recently, in my opinion, where with Aether Drift, we only had 2 precons. That's great. If you didn't have an idea that a concise idea that you wanted to get across, then have less product for it, which was great. We had Hashiton, and we had the Saheeli. Great, both really cool commanders. Saheeli has like 2 directions you can kind of take it with. Hashiton is already seeing some like high level commander and like some CDH play. Definitely not like top tier or anything, but really powerful in terms of what it can do into like cheating characters out and recursion and all that stuff. So that was a really cool idea, but we're almost like reverting it for this Universes Beyond set. We have no commander product to support these legendaries. These legendaries are made just in a panorama for the sake of collectability. They're so poor in terms of their playability, and they're going to have like almost no support. And the support they're going to get is going to be out of a standard legal set. But if it's a standard legal set that's meant for the sake of constructed, why are we putting commander staples directly in there? Right? It defeats the whole, idea of commander originally, which I think we're just well past, where commander was supposed to be this place where you could play your standard junk that you couldn't play anywhere in constructed because the spells were like just too big and too crazy. And so when it came to spells like that, you had more time, you had more ramp, you could get it going in something like Commander. And now we're just kind of feeding directly into that. It's almost like, again, we've found a way to make money with everybody. Everyone is saying speak with your wallet, but Wizards of the Coast is making it impossible to speak with your wallet. That is where ultimately I'm starting to find some of these problems. Now, this is a great little video that made its rounds on the interweb. Just essentially a very simple graph of when you F around, the more you F around, as you can see, it correlates to the fact the more you find out. And so that is where we as consumers are finding out now, because we've been effing around. We've been buying anything and everything. We love commander product. We love cosmetics. We love all this stuff. And for some reason, we don't hold our content creators to the fire, right? And I think I've been held to the fire a little bit as well. And I want to provide this criticism, but for some reason we get yelled at when we criticize, right? I don't want to go into the whole negative space. I think there's a lot of like Magic creators out there that the growth has been stunted by stuff like this. All they do is complain and they rage bait and all that stuff. But also some of the stuff they talk about is true, because it's important to have this critique. Because when we find out, we start losing some money as a consumer. We are having to pay more. Now, way back in 2024, Feels like way back. This is literally less than half a year ago. Magic returns to listing MSRP with foundations. So as we shared in MagicCon Las Vegas last year, MSRP returns. So foundations booster is about $525. This is all USD pricing, by the way. So when it comes to the Canadian dollar, this is like $1 million. This is like $25. I'm being hyperbolic, by the way. Collector booster is 25 bucks each. Starter collection, 60 bucks. Jumpstart booster. Innistrad remastered, a little bit more. Collector boosters at $30. Play boosters at $7. And you know, this is supposed to be a remastered set. It's not supposed to be like a full standard set. And then Aether Drift, kind of similar price, slightly more. I mean, why is the play booster $550 instead of $525? Okay, interesting. But regardless, you know, the commander deck's 45 bucks, bundles 55, and the specialty bundles at 80. Okay, so we have some general MSRP that we can kind of compare to. Now, obviously they mentioned here, well, over the years, we've continued to hear feedback, both retails and fans. Now, this is the key thing here. While most stores have always been able to set their own pricing and continue to do so, the proliferation of online marketplaces meant that the market price was anchored arbitrarily in people's minds by whoever listed the prices first. Those prices, for a variety of reasons, often didn't reflect the value of the products and didn't make sense for most local game stores. By reintroducing MSRP, we're aiming to create a consistent point of reference to help folks, both retailers and consumers, make an informed choice. Now that's good. We create a reference point. What happens when MSRP is significantly higher? Play boosters at $525. Now, MSRP for the Spider-Man set is $699. That's what the Innistrad prices were. Collector boosters at $38. Collector boosters for Foundations was $25. Collector boosters for Aether Drift was $25. Bundles are $70. Bundles are $54 here. Scene box is $42. Folks, you know what this means? The licensing of this product is being passed on to the consumer. They are licensing Spider-Man as an IP. They don't need to do that with something like Aether Drift or Khan's Dragonstorm that we're going to see down the line. They're passing on the licensing cost of the IP to the consumer, meaning that they know we're going to pay it. They know we're going to pay it. They can increase the price and make more money off of it. This is a cost benefit analysis of, this is just my wild guess. Again, I'm not gonna act like an economics expert. It's my wild guess of the fact that regular packs sell for like $550. They could have probably charged this at like $650 and still made like that. That would probably cover the cost of the licensing, but then they still need to make a profit on top of that. So then they're gonna charge it at $7 so they can make more, because they know we're gonna buy this. They know new players are coming in for this set. The Marvel fans are coming in for this set. And down the line in MagicCon Las Vegas, we're going to get our whole spiel for next year. You know, we're going to go back to Kamigawa in the beginning of next year. But what about the rest of the sets? We're going to get a whole new world of IPs that they're going to be charging more money for. And this cost is going to go up and up and up. Avatar: The Last Airbender is going to be the last Universes Beyond set last year and this year. And there's a lot of hype around it. They just announced a new show that's supposed to take place after The Legend of Korra. The IP in itself is having a lot of fandom discussion right now. There's a lot of hype around that set. This is going to be even more as that show and more information comes out on that next series. Now, we're likely not going to get any Legends of Korra or anything from that set in Avatar, but it's going to be a good feeler for people to get into that set, fans of that set, and Magic the Gathering fans to get into that set, into that show, and just kind of go on beyond. That's great and all, bringing more players in and having the gathering grow, but not when it's at the cost of our wallets. With everything being so expensive these days, Magic the Gathering is ultimately a luxury hobby. It also just kind of sucks when it costs this much to enjoy anything, right? Like me personally, I've been proxying the living heck out of everything. I have built 4 new commander decks in the span of a week, and I've just proxied all of it. I bought the commander because I wanted to. That was my own personal choice, but I proxied the crap out of all of them because I have access to a color printer. I have access to a free color printer. And so when it comes to something like that, of course, I'm just gonna print it all out. Why would I buy these cards? Some of these cards are so expensive. I don't know if I want to commit hard to this deck. And when it comes to a product like this, they made it so inaccessible, so expensive, and they're doing so over time. In the future, these cards are going to be so inaccessible, so expensive. Why would I bother buying these cards if I don't have to? Unfortunately, I have to with like my constructed decks. This is my mill deck box right here, and like these cards I keep up with, right? When it comes to new tech, like I bought 4 River Churn monuments and everything. Like if that card somehow becomes good in the future, I have bought all those cards and I have to for the sake of constructed. I may not go and play in paper as often, but for that one time I do, I want to make sure I'm ready. But when it comes to Commander, because it's not officially sanctioned, I can get away with that. And when it comes to a non-official CDH tournament, I have like a CDH deck or two, and I can just play in those like casual environments where people are trying to be serious, but ultimately they just want to play the game. They are there to play. They don't care about the tournament or anything. So, you know, I can play with those cards there. If I entered a tournament, obviously I would need those decks, and I don't have the money for all that. But when it comes to the cost of Magic, it's rising, and the cost to the consumer is rising, but the cost of Wizards isn't. And ultimately it has to come down to the whole Hasbro part of it, right? Like Hasbro is requiring Wizards of the Coast to make this much money. Hasbro is the ultimate problem because we can't offset the cost on the shareholders, because that's going to upset the shareholders. That's going to upset the balance, and they're going to get rid of the CEO, and eventually they're just going to bring in a leadership team that can make them more money. We cannot offset the cost on their shareholders, because that is not how our economic model works at all with anything. And so that's where we as a consumer are stuck with this, because it's now really hard to push back on something like this. Now that everything is in standard, everything matters to everybody, you have to pay attention to everything. Unless you are, again, live in a box and you can just be a commander only player, even still, you have to come across these cards. Eventually you're going to get into these pods where it's going to be Megatron versus SpongeBob versus Aang the Last Airbender versus Rick Steadfast Leader. The memes will continue, and you will have Universes Beyond full decks. The lands are art from Universes Beyond. The lands may actually only be Universes Beyond themselves, or art from that specifically. Like I built a Mr. House President CEO deck because I like the idea of like doing something novel in terms of like dice rolling and all that stuff. I'm playing it with attractions as well. And so that deck, obviously thematically, I built proxies for that deck. I wanted to use the Fallout art for it. And so you can do that with these cards. You can do these wacky arts, you can do these wacky themes and get away with it because this type of art exists. Now, Saffron Olive, finally, ending off on this note, brings up a good point. I'm pretty worried about how these prices will impact Standard. It's great that new players will come in and buy Final Fantasy or Spider-Man, but these players are also unlikely to sell their cards. So I'm not sure how this will increase supply for the rest of us. And this is where I want to go back to the idea of the panorama. The panorama is full of all these like mid like legendaries and cards. They don't have support around them because there's no commander product. That commander product will then be offset into the standard set, which we will find our commander staples in. And so I guess like commander players will now have to care about like standard packs and buying more packs and all that stuff to get these cards. They'll be buying less singles. They have to like be in that pool. But that also means that like those panorama cards will also be like less in supply. Like eventually down the line, what if we get some crazy symbiote support, crazy like Green Goblin support, and then that card is only then available in the panorama set? I hope that it's going to be available in the standard set. I hope that we will have access to it there, maybe alternate copies of it. That would be a great example of it, but I don't believe so. So far to what we've learned, those specific cards will only be legal in this. I don't think there's going to be an analog for it at all. We will be stuck without support for those cards, without other printings for those cards, and the collectors that like those cards will just get them, and they probably won't resell them because they just want them for the sake of having them, which is fine. It just doesn't increase the supply or affect the supply. Those cards will be artificially increased in price for like crazy absorbent amounts. As we've seen with some master sets, high price drafts often lead to less drafting. I mean, definitely leads to less drafting, which again could mean less card supply hitting the market. It's hard for me to imagine a world where standard doesn't end up meaningfully more expensive, which is a shame and threatens to undo the work that Wizards has put into revitalizing paper standard over the past year or so. Exactly. What is the point of Foundations? What is the point of standard being a double RCQ season this year? What is the point of any of this if the price of standard is going to increase so much? What is the point of any of this? I mean, Lord knows ain't nobody want to play Pioneer. I don't know. I feel like every time I hear someone talk about Pioneer, it's like they really love it or they really hate it. There's no in between. Whereas modern players are like, some people like hate it, but they like love it and kind of like really like it or kind of like it in between. Like there's more love for this type of format. So, you know, you don't bring in a Pioneer RCQ season. You want to double promote standard. You realize modern kind of sells as your like kind of highest power set that doesn't have like, you know, any reserve list cards or whatever and gets a lot of people in there, and you can directly monetize it with the Modern Horizon set. Otherwise you would go for something like Pauper because Pauper's gameplay is like amazing. So you push the double standard RCQ season, but for some reason with pushing that, you force people into a competitive season, into a competitive circuit to watch competitive Magic and be involved in high level Magic with higher priced cards, because the drafts that people have to be a part of to practice and get involved with competitive Magic in the scene, to be a part of the RCQ season, be a part of Worlds eventually, and eventually get down the line, the pipeline for all of this is going to be more expensive. So why get into all of that? I can ignore all of it. No, you can't, because it's going to be in Standard, it's going to be in Commander, it's going to be in Legacy, it's going to be in everything. All these sets exist everywhere. Everything's going to be more expensive. What is the ultimate solution to this? I don't know. I'm just bringing it to your attention that with all this news, these spoilers of Final Fantasy, with these spoilers of Spider-Man that just don't make any sense, and with the lack of marketing on Khan's Dragonstorm, and a set that's literally printing a Mox that should be able to market itself, bringing back Storm in a card that literally says Storm Scale, Scion. Storm Scale, like evoking the idea of the storm. I don't know what's going to happen with the prices of Magic. I'm really concerned with the price of Magic the Gathering increasing and just becoming inaccessible for so many people, and how proxying is seen as like such a negative thing. You have to work around it, especially if you're like WotC kind of partnered everything. Like you're never going to see like the Command Zone or like higher tier Commander creators do any of that. Like all those creators that you see go to like Magic Cons regularly and stuff, a lot of them aren't speaking out on stuff like this. They feel like they don't have the platform for it. They feel like they're going to get ghosted by Wizards of the Coast because ultimately their plan is to kind of get up there and everything, which is fine. You can't knock the hustle, right? You can't knock the hustle. I would love to be on like an episode of Game Nights, episode of Extra Turns, or an episode of Shuffle Up and Play. I'd love to, right? That definitely is like a creator goal of mine, but I also don't want to do it at the kind of loss of the fact that I can't critique this game. I don't want to actively ignore the problems that I myself as a creator am facing, because yes, I've had moments where I've received free things from Wizards of the Coast, and I've been very clear about when that is, but also there are plenty of times where I haven't. I'm not a kind of creator when it comes to situations like this. I haven't been a creator for Foundations. I've been an ambassador for other things, but the other creators that like don't say anything negative about Wizards of the Coast, those are the ones being ambassadors for this program, for Wizards of the Coast. And that's kind of the unfortunate things when it comes to stuff like this. They can't critique anything, otherwise they don't grow as a creator. And so we have to take these L's, kind of bringing this information to you. And I hope you as a consumer, my watchers, my viewers, can have a better time in terms of discerning like where your line is, where you stand, and where you're going to draw your line in terms of where you're not going to purchase product and where you're not going to engage with the product. I don't know. I'm kind of just ranting at this point. I wanted to bring this to your attention. I don't know. I hope this isn't too negative. I just thought it was important to bring up. Tomorrow, we're going to come back with definitely a bit more positivity. I'm going to be bringing about a small deck introduction that I've been working on for a little bit, like a deck list that I've been working on for a little bit. But anyway, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Let me know what you think about the rising price of Magic cards and how this has affected you as a consumer.